On a flight from Singapore to Tokyo, a passenger suddenly cries out in agony. He collapses near the bathroom, clutching his stomach. A flight attendant rushes over, but can only apologize helplessly. They've made an announcement, but no doctor has come forward yet. The man groans that the pain is so bad he can't even move. The flight crew prepares a seat for him to lie down, but one of the attendants grows anxious. She wonders what to do, calling out for a doctor one more time. The scene flashes back to 2 hours earlier, showing a packed departures board at the airport. At Singapore's Changi Airport, a final boarding announcement is made for Big Air Flight 51 to Tokyo. As passengers wait calmly, one person is seen sprinting frantically towards the gate. The flight attendant from the plane is at the gate, checking the remaining passengers. Suddenly, she gets bumped hard in the shoulder, wincing from the impact. A man with wild, two-toned hair and glasses bursts through, sending another passenger tumbling to the floor. Without stopping, he barrels towards the gate, leaving the flight attendant stunned. The man, Kino, desperately begs the flight attendant to let him on Flight 51. To his complete surprise, she says they were waiting for him. He freezes, shocked by her response. As they walk down the jet bridge, Haiji explains that he'd fallen asleep and was terrified he was too late. The flight attendant simply smiles, telling him she's glad he made it in time. While boarding, Haiji casually tells the flight attendant that her headache is coming from her spine. He mentions this despite being sleep-deprived himself, leaving her confused. He advises her to take a long bath and stretch from her neck to her tailbone to fix it. The attendant thanks him, stunned, realizing she never even mentioned having a headache. Haiji grins mischievously, revealing that he's a licensed doctor. He explains that his skills allow him to figure out things like that just by looking. The flight attendant can only stare, thinking he must be an incredible doctor. Back in the present, as the emergency unfolds, the sick passenger gets more agitated, demanding to know what the holdup is. The flight attendant apologizes, secretly hoping that the weird but brilliant doctor she met earlier will appear. Just then, another attendant arrives with a smile, announcing that a doctor has been found. An older man with a stern expression and a doctor's coat appears behind her. But the doctor isn't Haiji. He's completely passed out in his seat, muttering in his sleep. He complains that even in his dreams, he's stuck working, all while sitting right next to the very real medical emergency. A child nearby is excited about going to Disneyland. Haiji, half listening, thinks to himself that a sick person needs to be taken to a hospital immediately, not an amusement park. The child's excitement about Disney seems to finally stir Haiji. He sleepily asks who's sick. Meanwhile, a man with a beard, who had also been asleep, wakes up, having heard the flight attendant's announcement. The other doctor gets to work, noting that the patient's eyes are out of focus. He begins his examination, asking if the man has eaten in the last 5 hours or experienced any other symptoms. The flight attendants recognize the man as the famous Dr. Ishiguro from Meikage Medical University in Tokyo. They can't believe their luck, knowing he was in Singapore for a symposium. All the while, the passenger continues to suffer. After his examination, Dr. Ishiguro concludes it's a kind of food poisoning. He recommends turning the plane around immediately, given how much time is left before they reach Tokyo. The flight attendant is shocked, asking if the situation is really that serious. Dr. Ishiguro clarifies his reasoning. While the man's life isn't in immediate danger, forcing him to endure 6 more hours of intense pain would weaken him significantly. His final conclusion is that the patient needs proper hospital treatment as soon as possible. The sick passenger begs Dr. Ishiguro, explaining that he works overseas and rarely gets to see his daughter. The flight attendant, seeing the man's desperation, prepares to inform the pilot of their decision to turn back. Suddenly, the curtain is pulled aside. Haiji Kino stands there, his previously sleepy and disheveled look replaced by a sharp, intense focus. The flight attendant looks over, startled by his sudden appearance and changed demeanor. Haiji greets the group, and the flight attendant immediately recognizes him as the man from the gate. Dr. Ishiguro also looks up, seeing the new arrival. Haiji announces that he's a doctor and asks to examine the patient. The flight attendant thanks him, but says that Dr. Ishiguro is already on the case. The older doctor, however, graciously says he doesn't mind. Haiji adjusts his glasses, his eyes sharp and analytical. His entire presence has transformed from a bumbling latecomer into a serious medical professional. Dr. Ishiguro offers to share his findings, but Haiji ignores him. Instead, he turns directly to the patient and asks for permission to remove his shirt. After getting a quick thanks, he moves in, leaving Dr. Ishiguro momentarily stunned. Without any warning, Haiji presses a firm hand against the patient's chest. Dr. Ishiguro watches, confused and alarmed by the younger doctor's unorthodox methods. Dr. Ishiguro protests, but Haiji is already explaining his diagnosis. He states the man ingested a stimulant and is suffering from poisoning. By hitting specific acupoints, he can slow the stimulant and relieve the pain. He then calmly asks the patient how he feels. The patient looks up in utter shock. He stammers, completely bewildered, that the crippling pain is starting to fade away. Dr. Ishiguro quickly uses his stethoscope and listens in disbelief. The man's erratic pulse has returned to normal. He pushes past the now-recovering patient to get a better look, completely stunned by the result. The flight attendant asks if the patient is better. Haiji clarifies that he only temporarily stopped the pain and a hospital is still necessary. Dr. Ishiguro, however, is lost in thought, wondering how the man could have food poisoning if he only drank water. Feeling 1,000 times better, the passenger thanks everyone profusely. He confidently states that he can now make it all the way to Tokyo. The flight attendants are overjoyed and Haiji smiles satisfied. Dr. Ishiguro is still reeling, unable to comprehend what he just witnessed. He can't figure out how Haiji made such a perfect diagnosis without any equipment. As Haiji suggests they return to their seats, Ishiguro can only call the feat incredible. Just as Haiji turns to leave, Dr. Ishiguro suddenly performs a deep, formal bow. Haiji is completely taken aback, yelling out in surprise. Dr. Ishiguro admits that in his 40 years as a doctor, he's never met anyone like Haiji and feels utterly defeated. Humbly, he asks the younger man to teach him how he was able to make such an impossible diagnosis. Haiji agrees, on the condition that Dr. Ishiguro keeps what he's about to share a secret. The older doctor understands, saying he hopes to one day save a person on his own with such skill. Leaning in, Haiji begins to reveal his secret. He looks Dr. Ishiguro in the eye and tells him, "I can see the weak points in a person's body." Dr. Ishiguro is completely baffled by the explanation. Haiji adds the word light, which only confuses him more. He presses for more detail, asking what exactly he means by weak points. Haiji explains that since he was born, he's been able to see glowing lights on people's bodies. These lights indicate weak or brittle parts, which are split into two categories: innate vital points and weak points acquired from injuries or disease. Dr. Ishiguro is dumbfounded by the claim that Haiji can diagnose people just by looking at them. Haiji continues, explaining that it took him 12 years of intense training, 6 to understand the light patterns of different ailments, and another 6 to perfect his diagnostic accuracy. Dr. Ishiguro grabs Haiji's hands, his face filled with emotion. He thanks Haiji not just for his help, but for choosing to become a doctor in the first place. Haiji remarks that it didn't take much to convince him of his wild story. Dr. Ishiguro admits that while it's hard to believe, the fact remains that Haiji saved the passenger. He accepts that there are still many mysteries about the human body. With a hearty laugh, Dr. Ishiguro declares that as a fellow doctor, he wants to believe in the possibility of understanding a patient's condition with just a single glance. The two formally introduce themselves. The older man is Makoto Ishiguro, the director of Meikage University Hospital. The younger introduces himself as Haiji Kino. Haiji is floored, realizing Dr. Ishiguro is from the famous Meikage University in Tokyo. But Ishiguro humbly brushes it off, saying his own accomplishments are nothing compared to Haiji's. The name clicks for Haiji. He asks if this is the same Dr. Ishiguro who is a leading expert in artificial cell research. Dr. Ishiguro laughs, flattered, and apologizes for Haiji not recognizing his face. As they walk through the cabin, Dr. Ishiguro asks Haiji about his specialization. Haiji simply replies, surgery, which prompts Ishiguro to ask who taught him so much about the body's meridians. Haiji explains that his eyes let him see the cause and effect of ailments, so his acupressure is self-taught. Ishiguro praises his incredible skill, but then brings them back to the original mystery, how the passenger was poisoned on the plane. Suddenly, a voice interrupts them. A group of men, one holding a pistol, approaches them from the back of the plane, demanding to know what they're doing. The man with the gun asks if they're doctors. Before they can fully process the situation, he fires his silenced pistol without hesitation. The scene shifts to the Tokyo Metropolitan Police HQ, where a task force is being briefed. Big Air Flight 51 has been hijacked. There are 81 people on board, including passengers, crew, and the hijackers. The hijackers, armed with guns, are demanding 20 billion yen through an overseas bank. The passengers, including children, are shown huddled in fear. The lead hijacker smirks as he delivers their final threat. If their demands aren't met, they'll crash the plane right into Tokyo. Back on the plane, Haiji calls out to Dr. Ishiguro, who is slowly regaining consciousness. He's relieved to see the older doctor is awake. Dr. Ishiguro, covered in blood, weakly asks where they are. Haiji supports him, telling him they're in the plane's cargo hold. Ishiguro's memory is hazy. He remembers the hijacker firing the gun and being shielded by Haiji, but he doesn't know what happened after that. Haiji explains that the food poisoning was likely a diversion created by the hijackers. Once the chaos died down, he carried the unconscious Dr. Ishiguro down to the cargo hold. Dr. Ishiguro, confused, asks if Haiji was shot. Haiji calmly reveals that his suit is bulletproof. This revelation only gives Dr. Ishiguro more questions. Haiji interrupts, asking him to put pressure on a towel for his wound. Haiji calmly assesses Dr. Ishiguro's injuries. He has 2 gunshot wounds. While his organs are safe, his veins are badly damaged, causing severe bleeding. He concludes that he'll have to remove both bullets right there in the cargo hold. Haiji says that, luckily, the cargo hold contains all the tools he needs, and he has experience with bullet extractions. He asks for permission to operate. Dr. Ishiguro sweats, understanding the gravity of the situation. Dr. Ishiguro silently calculates that the surgery would take 90 minutes, even for a fast surgeon. He realizes this is too long. If the hijackers notice they're missing, Haiji won't be able to focus, and if they're found, it's all over. Dr. Ishiguro tells Haiji to abandon him. He insists that Haiji should focus on finding a way to escape and not waste time on an old bag of bones. He calls it common sense to ensure his own survival. He passionately urges Haiji to focus on the lives he can save, arguing that this is the fundamental way all doctors think. Haiji's expression hardens. He tells Ishiguro not to compare him to other doctors. He declares that Ishiguro is now his patient, and he wasn't asking whether he should abandon him. He was asking for permission to save him. Haiji holds up an anesthetic and gives Ishiguro a choice. He asks if he has regrets, and if he wants to live or die. The question hangs in the air, forcing the older doctor to confront his own will to survive. In that moment, Dr. Ishiguro flashes back through his life as a doctor, comforting colleagues, reassuring a child that her mother would be okay, and encouraging his patients. He remembers the faces of his patients, one confidently telling him he felt good, another promising to do her best, and a third thanking him for his care. All of them depended on him. With newfound determination, Dr. Ishiguro tells Haiji that he can't die yet. He has patients waiting for him. Haiji smiles gently. That's why us doctors exist. Tears stream down Dr. Ishiguro's face as he finally gives in, whispering a heartfelt, "Thank you," before losing consciousness. Meanwhile, back in the cockpit, an hour has passed. The lead hijacker checks his phone, impatiently demanding to know where the money is. On the other end of the line, the police negotiator explains that the sum is so large it's taking time to transfer. He asks for more time, but the hijacker refuses, saying 30 minutes is not enough. The leader clarifies that when he said 30 minutes, he wasn't talking about the money. He was talking about their lives. The camera pans over the terrified passengers and crew held captive by the armed men. The hijacker coldly lays out his terms. He'll kill one crew member every 30 minutes. Once the crew is gone, he'll start on the passengers. He taunts the negotiator, suggesting it's in their best interest to pay up fast. With a sinister grin, the leader hangs up, telling them he looks forward to their next call in 30 minutes. In the cockpit, the hijackers discuss their escape plan, which involves lowering the altitude and depressurizing the cabin. One of them finds a bottle of expensive alcohol and decides to have a drink while he waits. In the main cabin, a passenger prays desperately. Surrounded by armed men, she sends out a silent plea for anyone, God, Buddha, it doesn't matter, to save them. As if in answer to her prayer, a figure appears at the end of the aisle. It's Haiji, his shirt stained with blood, his expression cold and determined. The hijackers turn, surprised by his sudden appearance. Haiji pushes up his glasses, and the reflection shows the two armed hijackers standing before him, completely unaware of the danger they're in. In the cargo hold, Dr. Ishiguro sits against the wall, his wounds bandaged. On the floor are the 2 bullets that Haiji removed. Ishiguro checks his watch, muttering that 90 minutes was the minimum time he estimated for such a difficult operation in these conditions. But Haiji finished it in only 58 minutes. As Haiji gets ready to leave, Ishiguro asks who he is and where he's going, warning him that it's safer to stay hidden. Haiji looks over his shoulder, his expression grim. He adjusts his tie and states simply, I still have lives to save. Back in the main cabin, the hijackers are caught completely off guard by Haiji's appearance. One swings a knife while the other opens fire. But Haiji moves with impossible speed, diving right between them. The hijacker stares in disbelief as Haiji uses his scalpel to expertly deflect the bullets into the ceiling, rendering the attack useless. Panicked, the hijacker screams at the others to open fire as Haiji closes the distance in an instant. Haiji delivers a precise, 2-fingered strike to the first hijacker's neck, a vital point, instantly knocking him out. He spins and slams his elbow into the second man's side, causing him to cry out in pain before collapsing. In seconds, it's over. The 2 hijackers are unconscious on the floor. The sound of their bodies hitting the ground echoes as Haiji stands over them, his fingers still poised from the final strike. As his heart pounds, Haiji feels a familiar, dreadful sensation. The memory of a voice cuts through his mind. Son. He flashes back to his childhood, his body battered and bruised. A man looms over him, his voice laced with venom. I'm disappointed in you. It was his father. He scolds the young Haiji for wasting his time on foolish things like medicine, saying he thought his son would understand his true purpose without needing it spelled out. His father explains that Haiji's ability to see weak points is for attacking and killing. He declares that he will not see his son's talents wasted and will turn him into his finest assassin protege. His father then tells the young Haiji that the first step is to try and kill him. Back in the present, Haiji finishes subduing another hijacker, remembering his declaration to his father, I want to use this power to help people. With fiery determination, the young Haiji shouts that he is never going to kill anyone. The memory fades, and the passengers stare in stunned silence as the last hijacker falls. The silence is broken by a wave of cheers and applause. The passengers are amazed, asking how he moved so fast and thanking him for saving their lives. Haiji just scratches his head, a little embarrassed by the attention. The flight attendant approaches, thanking him profusely for what he's done. Haiji, ever the professional, asks her if she has a moment. Haiji asks where the rest of the hijackers are hiding, believing there are more in first class. He tells everyone to stay put while he goes alone, ignoring the flight attendant's panicked protests. In the first-class cabin, the remaining hijackers start to panic. One of them reports that he can't get a response from the man guarding the hostages. Another shouts that the passengers are fighting back, and they debate whether to change their plan. The hijacker leader scoffs at his subordinates' panic. He dismisses the threat as just some idiot trying to play hero and says all they need to do is shoot him. Hiji calmly prepares to face the remaining hijacker, a cold focus in his eyes. Hiji appears before the leader, tossing the clothes of a neutralized subordinate at his feet. He casually asks the stunned man if he's the only one left. The leader is completely speechless, stumbling over his words as he stares at Hiji. The hijacker finally recognizes Hiji as one of the doctors he shot earlier. He trembles in fear, wondering how he's still alive and where his impossible strength comes from. The terrified hijacker offers to call off the plan, but Hiji has other ideas. He explains that he's angry about Dr. Ishiguro getting shot. He says he won't kill him, but he will teach him a lesson about the pain people feel by using his knowledge of the bodies over 100 vital points. In a blur of motion, Hiji unleashes a relentless barrage of precise strikes, hitting vital point after vital point all over the hijacker's body. The assault continues, each strike targeting a specific weak point, overwhelming the hijacker with agonizing, non-lethal pain. The plane continues its flight as Hiji finishes his systematic takedown, leaving the hijacker leader completely incapacitated. With the last threat neutralized, Hiji casually enters the cockpit. The pilots are stunned, demanding to know who he is, realizing the hijackers had an escape plan. Hiji asks the pilot to maintain their current altitude. Just then, an explosion blows a hole in the side of the fuselage. The hijacker leader, still conscious, demands to know what's happening with the other terrorists. Hiji grabs something from a bag and heads toward the open hole in the plane, preparing to make his exit. He's stopped by Dr. Ishiguro, who has made his way to the front of the plane, still weak but determined. Hiji explains that he's borrowed a parachute and plans to disappear to avoid being questioned in Tokyo. Dr. Ishiguro realizes Hiji truly lives in a different world, but has one last question. Dr. Ishiguro asks if they'll be able to see each other again. With a bright smile, Hiji reassures him, definitely. And with that, he leaps from the plane. Back on the ground, after the plane has landed, the flight attendant asks Dr. Ishiguro where the doctor with the glasses went. Meanwhile, Hiji, now on the phone, lets out a sigh of relief, knowing the person on the other end has been told he's already long gone. As Hiji parachutes toward the ground, the person on the phone complains about how cleaning up after him is always a pain. They're amazed he can yawn after everything he's been through, but Hiji just says he's tired and is going to sleep, leaving the rest to them. The voice on the phone panics, realizing Hiji has fallen asleep midair. They shout his name, trying to wake him up as he drifts down, completely unconscious. Deep in a remote forest, a mysterious doctor named Kino is found sleeping against a tree, mumbling about an operation. Nearby, a massive, unidentified organic mass hangs from the branches, pulsing strangely. Suddenly, Kino's body jolts. His heart rate stabilizes, and a mechanical voice announces that the operation is commencing as he stands up, seemingly in a trance. A helicopter buzzes overhead. Still in a daze, Kino looks up, determined to do his best at whatever task is at hand. As the helicopter circles, Kino's eyes remain closed, but a notification confirms that a tumor has been discovered. Inside the helicopter, Kino awakens with a start, apologizing to someone named Chiwa. He explains that he couldn't sleep on the plane and was at his limit. A woman with a scar on her face retorts that she's used to his antics, reminding him that he nearly died from falling asleep in the middle of the North Pole. Kino gratefully acknowledges how much he owes his manager, Chiwako Ashimori, also known as Chiwa. She sighs, wishing he would improve, complaining that she's the one who gets in trouble if he dies. Chiwa confirms that his work in Singapore went well and she handled the arrangements. His identity was reported as a talented detective who spotted terrorists, and the aircraft landed safely, though some were injured. Kino laughs it off, admitting he was so focused on the situation that he didn't think about the consequences. With a menacing smile, Chiwa smacks her hand down, sternly reminding him to avoid standing out, even in emergencies. She tells him not to worry since the damage was minimal, but orders him to remember his place. He is Haiji, the underdoctor, someone who lives in the shadows. Kino thanks her for her help, but Chiwa cuts him off, her expression turning serious. She drops a bombshell on him. He's responsible for all the costs involved in manipulating the information from the incident. Kino's face contorts in shock. As Kino screams in protest, Chiwa coldly lists all the parties that had to be paid off: the airline, government ministries, public security, and the media. She grabs him, lamenting how hundreds of millions of yen were deducted from her account in a single day. However, she relents slightly, saying she'll cover some of it since he needs funds for his research. Chiwa then informs him that a new job just came in and they're heading there directly. To pay her back, she's going to give him a mountain of work. Terrified, Kino can only agree enthusiastically. The scene shifts to a rundown apartment complex, stopping at one of the doors. Inside, Kino and Chiwa stand before their client. They've tracked bloodstains on the floor. Chiwa introduces them, explaining they've come to tend to some wounds. A man covered in blood and sporting a large crane tattoo confirms he is Kikuta, the one who sent the request. He seems amazed that the legendary underdoctor actually exists. Still wary, Kikuta asks for identification. Chiwa steps forward and presents him with a wallet, asking if it will suffice. The wallet contains his own police badge, identifying him as Jun Kikuta from Public Security Section 9. Relieved, Kino mentions his surprise at the tattoos, which Kikuta explains are necessary for his undercover mission targeting the Great Crane Gang. Kikuta asks for his ID back, explaining that he's been searching for the Great Crane Gang's drug smuggling route for years, but was discovered. Before he can finish, Haiji steps forward to begin his examination. Lights flash in Haiji's eyes as he scans the wounds. He notes the blade incisions and puncture wounds, realizing that despite the cuts not being severe, Kikuta has lost a lot of blood over time. Haiji declares they'll perform the operation right there and bill public security. Chiwa tells Kikuta to leave everything to the doctor, but the investigator is unnerved, wondering why his life is in the hands of a man who hasn't even properly checked him. Haiji bluntly states he doesn't have time to explain everything. Kikuta gets a bad feeling, suspecting that even if he got an answer, it wouldn't be very reassuring. Kikuta demands to know who Chiwa is. As Haiji prepares his equipment, Chiwa explains that the doctor possesses godlike eyes to detect any wound or illness and is an expert surgeon, telling him he can relax. When asked for her identity, Chiwa simply replies, "I'm an Ashimori." The name leaves Kikuta completely stunned. Kikuta realizes the gravity of the situation. The Ashimori are a legendary clan of underground mediators. It's his first time seeing one in person. Just as he processes that she must be the doctor's link to public security, Haiji alerts them that there are people outside. A group of menacing figures stands right outside the apartment door. Haiji notes that there isn't just one or two of them, while Chiwa casually wonders if they're just neighbors. Kikuta clarifies that this is an emergency safe house. No one else lives in the building. The only people who could possibly be there are the ones who followed him, the Great Crane Gang. He explains that he avoided calling an ambulance so civilians wouldn't get involved, but now he feels guilty for dragging the doctor and his manager into this dangerous mess. Apologizing, Kikuta tells the two of them to run. He's a detective and is prepared to face what's coming, his thoughts drifting to his family, Shoko and Koki. As a gang member begins to force the door open, Haiji calmly states that they won't be running. He turns to Kikuta and asks what he wants to do, then decides for him. "I'll deal with them. Get the operation ready for me." Before the gangster can react, Haiji thrusts his fingers forward with impossible force, piercing straight through the metal door and jabbing the man in the throat. The other gang members reel back in shock. Without hesitation, Haiji smashes through the weakened door, launching himself into the hallway. One of the goons cries out his friend's name, Yamazaki, just before Haiji sends the man flying down the stairwell with a single, devastating blow from his medical case. Another gangster points an alarm, but Haiji is already on him, delivering a swift, precise strike that instantly takes him out of the fight. Back inside the apartment, the sounds of intense fighting echo from the hallway. Unfazed, Chiwa makes small talk, asking Kikuta if he was really undercover for 3 whole years. Kikuta, coughing and still injured, anxiously asks if the doctor will be okay on his own. Chiwa coolly tells him that laymen shouldn't nitpick medical practitioners. As Haiji continues to effortlessly dismantle the gangsters in the hall, Chiwa reassures the worried investigator. "You needn't worry," she says. "He's strong." Kikuta is stunned in his silence, unable to believe that a simple doctor could possess such incredible strength. Chiwa corrects his assumption. Haiji isn't a doctor who became strong. He's a strong person who became a doctor. As Haiji single-handedly takes on the armed gang members, Kikuta reflects on his own career. He's met several monsters who have surpassed the limits of common humans, and he now wonders if this doctor is one of them. One of the gangsters, holding his injured arm, can only stare in disbelief and wonder, who the hell is that doctor? Kikuta asks the question on everyone's mind. Who is he? Chiwa gives a deceptively simple answer, telling the stunned investigator that Haiji is just a normal doctor. Chiwa elaborates that while he's strong, he always does his best to save the patients he encounters. She describes him as a typical, chronically sleep-deprived meddler. Outside, Haiji calmly finishes off the last of the thugs. Haiji steps back into the room, casually announcing, "All done." He tells a shocked Kikuta that they can begin the operation whenever he's ready. Before starting, Haiji gives his patient a pep talk. He tells Kikuta that his body is burdened by blood loss, but he should use his desire to see his loved ones again as motivation to overcome the hardship together. Haiji smiles, repeating that he's just a normal doctor. But Kikuta stares at him, his expression making it clear he doesn't believe that for a second. Stealing his resolve, Kikuta holds up a photo of his family. He declares that they are everything to him, and he can withstand any amount of pain if it means he gets to see them again. With newfound determination, Kikuta puts his trust in Haiji, asking him to do his best. The doctor confidently replies, "Of course," as the scene shows the now empty street below. Several days later, a loud "no" echoes from the Tokyo Public Security Hospital. The cry belongs to Kikuta's young son, who doesn't want to stop playing. His wife tells him to say goodbye, as his dad has work matters to discuss. The boy reluctantly wishes his dad farewell. Kikuta, recovering in his hospital bed with his neck bandaged, smiles warmly and promises his son that they'll play a ton again tomorrow. It's revealed the boy was playing with Haiji. He cheerfully thanks Haiji, prompting his mother to correct him to use Mr. Haiji. Kikuta looks on, dumbfounded by the casual scene. Kikuta apologizes, saying he didn't mean to make the doctor entertain his kid. Haiji says it was fun, but seeing that his patient is doing well, he prepares to leave. Kikuta expresses his deep gratitude for all the help. As Haiji turns to go, Kikuta calls out to him, his tone turning serious. He looks Haiji in the eyes and offers his sincere gratitude, saying, "Thanks to you, I got to see my family again." Haiji replies that it's just his job, but Kikuta excitedly says he'll be counting on him again after he returns to work. This makes Haiji playfully scold him for planning to nearly die again, reminding him to prioritize his safety because he's an expensive doctor. With a final "take care now," Haiji and Chiwa leave the hospital room, bringing this intense chapter to a close. The scene shifts to a dark lab, where someone is examining a series of petri dishes. A voice notes that samples E1 through E6 show no changes. It's Haiji, now in a lab coat, looking concerned. He notes that samples F and G are also showing no reaction, hinting at a new medical mystery. Back in his lab, Haiji sighs in disappointment over his latest batch of experiments. They were all failures, even though he had been confident this time. Just then, Chiwa comes in. We get a glimpse of Haiji's home, an underground laboratory somewhere in Tokyo, filled with equipment. Chiwa unloads boxes of new supplies he ordered, warning him not to break anything. She questions his spending habits, noting that the new equipment is even more expensive than the last batch. Haiji proudly boasts that he's just keeping up with the latest releases. Chiwa is furious when she discovers he only has 80 yen left in his account, asking how it's possible when he just made 100 million yen from the Singapore job. Haiji nonchalantly explains he found an analysis machine he really wanted and is now broke again. Sighing, Chiwa brings him a cup of coffee. She concedes that it's his money to use as he wishes, but points out that his passion project, researching incurable diseases, is an incredibly expensive one, especially when funded out of pocket. Haiji looks on with a serious expression, explaining that the diseases he's researching are orphan diseases, meaning they have very few documented cases. He elaborates that normally, disease research is funded by governments or universities. However, there's no profit in finding cures for diseases that only a few people suffer from, so almost no one is willing to fund it. Chiwa understands now. This massive, self-funded research project, requiring a budget the size of a small nation's, is all for a friend of his who is lying in a coma. Haiji vows to do whatever it takes, and learn whatever he must to finally wake him up. Chiwa leans in close, teasingly asking if he's really doing all this just for a friend. Haiji smiles, confirming that waking his friend is, of course, his main goal. But he adds that the world is teeming with rare diseases. And even if the case numbers aren't high, there are still people out there suffering from them. Looking at Chiwa, he explains his philosophy. While it makes sense to prioritize illnesses that affect many people, that doesn't mean you can just ignore the ones that only affect a handful. An image of an older man appears behind him as he makes his final point. If he's the only person who can do what the doctors on the surface can't, then to him, it's worth it. He finishes by saying it's worth it, even if it leaves him broke. Seeing him so determined, yet so poor, Chiwa sighs. She tells him she wasn't sure if she should mention it, but a high-paying job offer came in that morning, piquing his interest. With a serious look, Chiwa poses an important question for this new job. You can speak Mandarin, right? The scene shifts dramatically to Shanghai, China. A car pulls up to an opulent building where a group of men are waiting. A voice welcomes them, addressing Haiji as the underdoctor. A man with a long, braided ponytail introduces himself as Lai. He tells Haiji that his accomplishments precede him and that the boss is quite eager to meet him. The story flashes back to the lab, where Haiji casually confirmed to Chiwa that yes, he knows Mandarin. In a flashback, Chiwa explains the details of the job. The request came from the Black Coin, a criminal organization based in Shanghai. Though they're only 7 years old, they're involved in everything from arms smuggling to drugs. She admits she was hesitant to take the job because they're super evil people. The job itself was to perform a heart transplant for the 14-year-old daughter of their boss, Leinya. Chiwa had noted in her briefing that the girl likely had no connection to her father's criminal empire, and the reward for pulling it off was a staggering 500 million yuan, converting to roughly 1 billion yen. Back in the present, with that life-changing sum on the line, Haiji and Chiwa are led by Lai deeper into the Black Coin headquarters. Lai confirms the rumors about Haiji, asking if he was the one who operated on the president of Istanbul. Haiji admits he accepted the job through a proxy. Meanwhile, Chiwa nervously hopes the negotiations for the 1 billion yen reward go smoothly. As they enter the boss's room, Chiwa is ecstatic. A 1 billion yen payday, even after a split, would be huge. She clenches her fist, dreaming of finally making up for the massive losses she suffered during the hijacking incident. They step into an opulent office. A voice greets them, saying it's an honor to meet them, and invites the group to sit down. A man with a distinctive mohawk and long goatee introduces himself. He is Leinya, the leader of the Black Coin, and the one who sent the job request. Haiji introduces himself and his agent, Chiwa, ready to discuss the details. He gestures to the young girl beside Kong and asks if this is his daughter. Kong confirms her name is Yogi, but as Haiji looks at her, his expression suddenly changes. His eyes widen with a sudden realization. He interrupts the pleasantries with a sharp, "One point of order, Mr. Kong." Haiji looks directly at the crime boss and drops a bombshell that shocks everyone in the room. "You're the one in need of surgery." Haiji demands an explanation, stating they were under the impression his daughter was the patient. Kong bursts into laughter, admitting his surprise, and saying he shouldn't have doubted the rumors about the underdoctor's incredible diagnostic skills. Chiwa is furious, realizing they've been tricked. Kong apologizes, explaining that his position as a crime lord means he has many enemies, and he had to conceal his illness to arrange the surgery without them finding out. Haiji's eyes confirm the diagnosis. Kong is suffering from severe heart failure and will likely only last a few more months. Kong explains that half a year ago, doctors gave him less than a year to live, but both legitimate and underground surgeons in his country were too afraid to operate. He turns to Haiji, appealing to his reputation. He's heard that Haiji is not only a genius at surgery, but also a man who doesn't discriminate between his patients. Tears well up in the crime boss's eyes as he bows his head, his voice filled with desperation. "Doctor, you are my last hope." He begs Haiji to operate on him, admitting that his physical weakness has spread to his spirit and there's no other doctor he can turn to. Chiwa can only gasp in shock at the shameless plea. Chiwa is absolutely furious. This is outrageous. He lied from the start and is now treating them like fools with crocodile tears. She urges Haiji to reconsider, but the doctor simply says no. Despite Chiwa's protests, Haiji remains calm. He tells her he understands the situation and makes his decision. A life is a life. I'll perform the surgery. Chiwa can't believe her ears. Kong is overjoyed, profusely thanking the doctor. Haiji agrees, but with a stern warning. If there are any more lies, the deal is off. Kong eagerly promises his gratitude from the bottom of his heart. As the conversation continues, Chiwa blames herself. She knows the doctor doesn't choose his patients and will save any life he can. That's why she's supposed to screen the jobs. She feels she completely screwed up. Sensing her distress, Haiji turns and apologizes. He admits that Kong might not be a good person, but he might be the only one who can save his life. Haiji thanks her for her support, promising they'll get their billion yen from this. Chiwa smiles, accepting his decision. She tells him she knows, and that no matter what kind of person the patient is, she'll keep doing what she can to help. With the decision made, Haiji brings up one last, crucial concern before the operation. He tells Kong that finding an adequate donor heart is no small task and asks who the donor will be. Kong gives a chilling response. "Please use my daughter." Chiwa is horrified by the suggestion. Haiji calmly explains that for heart transplants, donor hearts are normally taken from brain-dead patients, not healthy ones. Kong simply repeats his request. "Please transplant my daughter's heart into me." Kong explains his cruel logic. He has an incredibly rare blood type, Bombay blood, making it impossible to find a compatible donor. He callously reveals that Yogi is his illegitimate daughter, born to a prostitute in a slum, and since she shares his rare blood, she is the only match. He finishes by saying no one will mourn her if she dies. With a twisted smile, he calls finding her a miracle, saying that even something he once thought useless could be made useful with a little ingenuity. He pats the terrified girl's head, claiming that she has, of course, agreed to it. He puts his daughter on the spot, asking her, "Isn't that right, Yogi?" The girl can only tremble and meekly reply, "Yes, father." Seeing this, Haiji's expression hardens as he makes his decision. Haiji stands up and declares, "The operation is off." He gives the crime boss an ultimatum. Find a proper donor, and they can proceed. If not, Haiji will be leaving, and he's taking the girl with him. Lai calls his decision nonsense, and Kong demands to know why he can't just perform the surgery. Haiji stands firm, refusing to take one life to save another. He repeats his demand, "Bring me a proper donor organ." Suddenly, Yogi herself cries out, begging him not to refuse. "You can't say no," she screams, pleading with him to perform the surgery. Kong grabs his daughter, holding her like a shield. He sneers at Haiji, asking what's the point of worrying about her life, and gives a chilling threat. Every other doctor who dared to say no has been dealt with. On cue, Lai steps forward. His hand transforms, revealing a set of long, menacing blades. With a smug grin, he looms over Haiji, saying he hopes the doctor will give the surgery his full consideration. But Haiji doesn't even flinch. Even with the blades at his throat, he is completely unmoved, his gaze fixed on Kong. He repeats his demand one last time. Bring me another heart. Lai lunges, swinging his deadly claws. But in a flash, the blades shatter upon impact, leaving the henchman staring in disbelief. Before Lai can even react, a fist slams into his face with brutal force. Haiji follows up with a powerful kick, sending the subordinate flying across the room and crashing into the wall. Standing protectively in front of Chiwa and Yogi, Haiji stares down the stunned crime boss. He delivers a powerful, unwavering command that cuts through the tension. Don't disparage life. With a single lightning-fast blow, Haiji sends one of the guards flying, his face twisting from the impact. Standing over the unconscious body, he gives a stern warning, don't disparage life. The man holding the little girl scoffs, admitting he underestimated the doctor. He acknowledges Haiji's skill as an underdoctor, one who operates in the shadows, but still demands that he let the girl go. But he quickly reveals his hand. A small army of armed men surrounds Haiji and his companion, ready to open fire. Their sheer numbers are meant to intimidate, as the boss wonders how Haiji will handle this new threat. Chiwako sighs, her expression hardening. It seems their attempt to handle this peacefully has just failed. She mutters that they should have known better than to play nice with these kinds of people. Without another word, she drops her briefcase and pulls out 2 pistols, declaring that she's annoyed now and will take care of them herself. Haiji can only watch, completely stunned. The armed guards mock her, unable to believe that one woman thinks she can take on all of them at once. But Chiwako stands her ground, completely unfazed by their taunts. Suddenly, she opens fire, but instead of aiming at the men, her bullets hit the floor. One of the more cautious guards warns the others not to drop their guard, sensing that something is wrong. His warning comes too late. A bullet ricochets off the wall and strikes a man in the head. The others stare in disbelief, wondering where she's even aiming. One of the men panics, thinking there's a sniper outside. But it quickly becomes clear the impossible shots are coming from Chiwako, her bullets curving through the air with deadly precision. The room erupts in a storm of gunfire as Chiwako unleashes a barrage of shots, never once aiming directly at her targets. The men finally realize her terrifying ability. Her bullets are bouncing off every surface in the room. In a panic, their leader screams for them to charge and stop her before she can fire again. As they rush forward, Chiwako leaps into the air, dodging their attack, while simultaneously returning fire with pinpoint accuracy. In an instant, it's all over. The guards lie groaning on the floor. Chiwako stands tall, feeling much better now that she's let off some steam. Haiji, however, nervously points out that a few of those stray bullets came a little too close to him. She calmly explains to the downed men that her bullets are designed for ricocheting, losing power with each impact. They won't kill, but they will cause a broken bone or 2. She then advises them all to get to a hospital quickly. Haiji is amazed, wondering how she could possibly hit anything with such a chaotic firing style. She coolly replies that it's just a matter of simple math and calculating the bullets' paths. Meanwhile, the boss, Leinya, peeks out from behind cover. He survived the onslaught only because he realizes with dawning horror that Chiwako wasn't even aiming for him. He breaks out in a cold sweat, admitting to himself that he was a fool. He never imagined that Haiji and his manager would be this powerful, capable of taking down every single guard in his mansion. Haiji once again tries to reason with him, offering to perform the surgery if he lets the girl go and finds a legitimate donor. But Leinya, desperate and cornered, refuses to listen. Just then, a new figure silently appears in the doorway. A person in a black robe with long white hair, their face hidden behind a menacing mask. A new, unknown threat has just entered the field. Seeing his reinforcement arrive, Lenya's confidence returns with a sneer. He declares negotiations are over and orders his newbie, the masked assassin, to finish the job. But instead of attacking, the masked figure begins making a series of strange hand gestures. Haiji and Chiwako can only watch in confusion as they realize the assassin is trying to communicate with them using sign language. Chiwako apologizes, stating that she doesn't understand sign language. The masked assassin pauses for a moment, then immediately brandishes a blade, deciding to let violence do the talking instead. In a flash, the assassin lunges forward, kicking both Haiji and Chiwako with such force that they're sent smashing through the second-story window and out of the building. Haiji is stunned by the assassin's incredible speed, realizing he knocked Chiwako away in the blink of an eye. He scrambles to his feet, frantically calling out to see if she's okay. Before he can even recover, the masked figure is on him again, launching a furious series of slashes that Haiji barely manages to deflect. Just as Haiji dodges, another figure appears out of nowhere, landing a powerful attack that shatters the ground where he just stood. The initial attack, it seems, was just a diversion. This new attacker, a man with massive metal claws, licks his weapon with a sadistic grin. Haiji, however, remains completely unfazed, letting out a small chuckle. The clawed man grins, offering a twisted apology. He admits he underestimated Haiji at first, and that his previous surprise attack was genuinely meant to kill him. The man, Leinya, turns to his boss, politely asking for permission to kill the doctor. Leinya, annoyed, simply asks what took him so long to show up. The boss decides to play his final card. He reveals Leiny's true identity, a mass murderer known as the Thousand Killer, who once slaughtered 35 police officers with a single kitchen knife. He then gives Haiji an ultimatum: agree to the surgery, and he'll call off his monster. Hearing this, Haiji begins to let out a strange, wheezing laugh. The others look on, completely baffled by his bizarre reaction to the terrifying threat. Haiji dismisses the title of Thousand Killer, saying it's nothing to brag about. After all, he mutters with a cold expression, it's incredibly easy for a human to die. He gives his final, unwavering answer: I'm not performing the surgery. Period. Leinya can only stare, his desperate gamble having completely failed. A wide, sadistic grin spreads across Lei's face. Now the negotiations are off the table. He's free to do what he does best. He crouches, muscles tensing, ready to pounce. With explosive force, Lei lunges at Haiji, promising to slice him to pieces without holding back. His claw rips through the air, aims straight for the doctor's neck. But Haiji dodges with impossible grace, leaning back so far that the claws barely miss him. Even while upside down and mid-evasion, he's already analyzing his opponent, noting that his muscle balance is poor. As he flows into his counterattack, Haiji bluntly tells Lei that he's a third-rate fighter, all brute strength and no skill. The assassin is horrified, realizing the doctor saw through his movements completely. Haiji continues his thought, remembering he already punched Lei once out of anger. But this time it's different. With perfect calm, he lands a precise strike on the assassin's chest. Immediately, Lei's body is racked with violent spasms. Haiji calmly explains that he struck a vital point he discovered, one that will leave the assassin paralyzed with numbness for the next 2 or 3 days. The feared Thousand Killer crumples to the floor, completely neutralized. With the immediate threat handled, Chiwako reappears, gun raised and ready. But across the room, the masked assassin, Shulie, offers a soft, almost regretful apology before lunging into action. In a flash, Shulie captures Chiwako, holding her hostage. Leinya erupts in celebration, believing he's finally won now that Haiji is cornered. The doctor, however, just looks on with a calm, unreadable expression. To everyone's surprise, Haiji begins to use sign language, telling the assassin to let Chiwako go. Chiwako can only stare in disbelief, stunned that he knows how to communicate with their attacker. Shulie signs back, asking how the doctor could possibly know sign language. Then, to the absolute shock of his boss, he lets Chiwako go. Leinya screams in fury, but Haiji simply smiles. Haiji continues signing, giving a simple, confident answer to Shulie's question. Because I'm a doctor. Kong Leinya roars at Shulie for disobeying a direct order, but the young assassin ignores him. He signs to Haiji that this is the first time he's ever met someone else who knows sign language, and he walks away from his boss to speak with the doctor. Shulie finds it interesting, having only ever communicated with his parents this way. Haiji explains that he learned international sign language to speak with patients all over the world. He then correctly guesses Shulie's age to be around 15 or 16. The doctor then asks why someone so young is working for this criminal group. Shulie signs back that it's just a job for money, but then glances around the room, realizing with a start that he's the only one of the boss's men still standing. With both Lai and his guards defeated, Kong Leinya collapses in despair. He mutters that his one chance was holding the girl hostage, and now that Shulie has let her go, it's all over. He believes there's no way a child could defeat the man who took down the 1,000 killer. Shulie lets out a dismissive click of his tongue. He begins signing again, leaving both Chiwako and Kong Leinya completely baffled as to what he's communicating to the doctor. Through his gestures, Shulie scoffs at being compared to a fifth-rate nobody like Lai. With chilling confidence, he simply asks if he should just eliminate both Haiji and Chiwako now. Haiji clenches his fist, his expression hardening. He declares that their brief conversation is now over. In response, Shulie drops into a fighting stance, ready for battle. Haiji's hand opens, beckoning his young opponent forward. Shulie accepts the challenge, ready to see what the doctor is truly made of. The two clash in a furious exchange of blows, their movements a blur of speed and precision. Chiwako watches in astonishment, amazed that a kid like Shulie has the talent to actually keep up with Haiji. But as the fight rages on, Shulie grows confused. He realizes Haiji is only parrying his attacks, not launching any of his own. It feels as if the doctor is holding back. Suddenly, Haiji's demeanor changes. He unleashes a wave of pressure, his gaze turning deadly serious. For the first time, he stopped holding back. An instant later, Shulie is sent flying backward, his body reacting like a wild animal sensing mortal danger. He lands on all fours, his heart pounding, wondering what just happened. Haiji calmly stands over him, remarking on the boy's incredible instincts. Shulie had managed to move back after sensing just a tiny hint of bloodlust. Praising the move as a wise decision, Haiji's face momentarily appears to Shulie as that of an old man. The young assassin is shaken, recognizing the familiar figure of his master. Haiji compliments Shulie's training, noting that his teacher must have been exceptionally talented. He then makes a guess that stops Shulie cold. Grim Reaper? The boy can only sign back in shock, unable to believe he heard that name. Looking to confirm his suspicion, Haiji turns to Chiwako and asks if she's ever heard of an assassin called the Grim Reaper. She recalls the name, explaining that he was a legendary figure, once known as China's most powerful assassin, who supposedly died decades ago. Chiwako seems confused, asking why Haiji would bring up a legendary assassin when she knows nothing about killers. Haiji simply thanks her for the information she did provide. The scene shifts back to Shulie, who confirms with a sign that the Grim Reaper was his master. As a memory of the old man flashes in his mind, he clenches his fist, resolving that he may have to break the promise he made. The story dives into a flashback of their first meeting. In a rundown building, the Grim Reaper shouts at a young, terrified Shulie for breaking in, boasting that he could have killed the boy with one leg if he'd wanted to. The old man demands an explanation, but the trembling child can't speak. Just as he's about to yell again, a loud growl from Shulie's stomach cuts through the silence. With a gruff sigh, the Grim Reaper tosses the boy some food, telling him to eat and stop stealing from people. As Shulie wolfs down the meal, the Reaper tells him to get lost and never show his face again. But the boy kept coming back. Annoyed, the Reaper realizes the child can't speak and asks if he can at least hear. Shulie nods, and the old man begrudgingly lets him stay and eat. While feeding him, the Reaper would taunt the boy, calling him pathetic for being born poor and mute. But despite the harsh words, he continued to provide for the child. One day, the old man shoves a book into Shulie's hands, a beginner's guide to sign language. He claims he just found it and is only teaching the boy to pass the time, but the act of kindness shines through. The Reaper then offers to teach Shulie martial arts, but on one condition. He must promise to never take a life. For the young, silent boy, this was the beginning of everything. Back in the present, the flashback ends. Shulie snaps off the heavy training weights on his arms, which clatter to the ground. Hijacked observes calmly, noting that this will only make his opponent faster. Shulie steals his resolve. He knows he can't hold back against an opponent like Hijacked, and so he accepts that he cannot keep his promise not to kill. He lunges forward, ready to end it. With his speed, now unhindered, Shulie moves in a flash, circling behind Hijacked and locking him in a chokehold before the doctor can even react. Chiwako screams in terror as Shulie tightens his grip around Hijack's neck. The young assassin thinks he's finally won, feeling the doctor struggling for air in his grasp. But even as he's being choked, Hijack's mind is working. He clinically analyzes his situation, noting that strong pressure on the neck prevents oxygen from reaching the brain, the easiest way to kill with bare hands. But this was all part of his plan. He knew Shulie was at a disadvantage in close combat and predicted he would try a desperate move like this. And that meant, for a few crucial seconds, Hijack's own hands were free. While Shulie's arms are occupied with squeezing his neck, Hijacked calmly brings his hands up, completely free to counterattack as he pleases. With surgical precision, Hijack's fingers strike two specific points on Shulie's neck. The young assassin's eyes widen in shock as a jolt runs through his body. Hijacked follows up with another series of precise strikes to Shulie's throat. The boy gasps, his grip faltering, as Chiwako watches with renewed hope. Unleashing a flurry of strikes against his neck and shoulders, Hijacked calmly warns him, "This'll sting." Shulie's body convulses as the blows land on critical nerve clusters. The force of the precise, non-lethal attacks is immense, sending cracks spiderwebbing across the assassin's hard mask. Shulie's mask finally shatters, revealing his face for the first time. He's just a boy, his eyes wide with pain and confusion as he struggles to understand what's happening. He doesn't understand. None of his master's techniques are working. His entire body feels like it's burning and freezing at once, an overwhelming sensory overload that's nothing but pure pain. Hijacked looks down at the boy, explaining that he held back because he's just a child. But then he reveals his true purpose. He had also stimulated the nerves around his neck, and now all Shulie needed was a single final push. Writhing on the floor in agony, Shulie clenches his jaw, trying to fight back the overwhelming pain that Hijacked has inflicted upon him. And then it happens. A raw, guttural scream rips from Shulie's throat, the first sound he's made in years. As the others stare in shock, Hijacked simply smiles, his treatment a success. And there it is,